pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call?
Trustee Blower,
Yes.
trustee Fisher,
Yes.
trustee Patterson. Present.
Public participation. Anybody wish to address the board or talk about anything this evening? Administrators updates. Laura?
Tonight, we have one piece of legislation that we have included on this agenda to have it expedited. The fire chief has asked for you to consider promoting a current part-time employee to full-time staff. Normally, we would not include legislation on this agenda, but just due to his current staffing issues and due to the fact that this is already a current employee, we are asking you to consider approval of this promotion this evening.
Okay. Purpose, promote part-time firefighter medic Steve Meyer to full-time. Move for the adoption of motion 23-072 to promote Steve Meyer into the position of full-time firefighter medic at a rate of $23.58 per hour, and to require the same percentage expense as for the police department employees for his selected township offered benefits effective June 4th, 2023. This action is in compliance with the current staffing level and pay summary. I need a second, please.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Trustee Fisher,
Yes.
trustee Patterson. Yes. Trustee Blower.
Yes. Fiscal officers updates.
I have nothing at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Discussion items, short-term topics. First one is police department levy. Is the fiscal officer leading with this or?
I updated the information that I provided to you, the historical history of levies pass fail rates since 1994. I was able to update and plug in a few holes, nothing of major consequence. I was able to capture an estimated revenue. Ironically, the most recent is the one I didn't have. And then I was able to plug some holes as to whether it was additional renewal or replacement going back. So you have that in front of you, just so you know what the pass-fail ratios were and the number of people who voted during those cycles. So as I pointed out in the email, you'll see a line drawn, and basically what that was in 2013. No, I'm sorry. It's out of order. Yes, 2013. The Board of Trustees at that time passed a 2.75 additional, replacing the 1 mil renewal, voluntarily rescinded it. And that's the only thing that's kind of interesting on there. Otherwise, they all flow in the normal timeframes. So in case you had any questions about that, again, the news on with the auditor's values, it looks like the tax commissioner apparently appears to be backing down a bit. George Lang and Thomas Hall have both promised items in the June budget bill for the Senate and the House that if the tax commissioner doesn't do something productive, they are going to do something. So it looks like now we're back down to that original increase of 24%. And that's them averaging the 3 years. And that's probably fair. It's not pretty. None of us want that, but it's probably fair, and it's much better than a 40% hike. So with all that being said, basically tonight, what I would like to see, because the Marion Nardiello assistant prosecutor has reached out to see if she missed an email from me. And I said, no, she would likely have something tomorrow if all goes well. So she knows what ballot language to prep so that we can have it back for the first meeting in June to do the resolution of necessity. So that's the first step. So I don't know. Now it's up for you all to decide which choice we want to do. whether we're going to make it a continuous, a 5-year. We're going to renew, replace, and do with an increase or a standalone additional. It's all up for discussions.
We've heard that there was language in the House budget proposals that limits the ability to renew. You heard anything about that? I
No,
caught like a little bit of wind of it. And I
Oh,
wasn't
no.
sure what it
I've been talking to Mary Ann and she hasn't mentioned anything.
said anything. I will look up while we
Okay.
talk.
Do you think it's something that's already passed or something that they're chatting about?
No, it seems like it was something they were chatting about because it was only on the House side and we haven't reconciled yet.
Well, if we have to have things there by August, they can't they
Well, and it
can.
was starting in 24.
Okay,
So yeah, I'm sorry. Keep
Okay.
going for you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
kind of, if it's going to affect what we're doing now.
No, it wasn't affecting now. I'm just thinking as the board thinks about like the big picture of how you could see this extrapolated into the future.
I also read a little bit of something, Thomas Hall mentioned that they are wanting to put back some of the rollback, maybe qualify. I don't know what that means. Does that mean restore qualifying levy status? I don't know. But this particular levy has already lost its qualifying levy status. So if you increase it, it doesn't impact that. If you run a new one, it doesn't impact it. So it's for that perspective, it's apples to apples. Do you know what qualifying levy means? Does that mean anything to you?
Would you please?
It just occurred to me. A qualifying levy is traditionally levies are part of the rollback reimbursement that we receive from the state of Ohio. So on your tax bill, it used to be you got a 10% or 10% non-business credit and a 2.5% owner occupied credit for a total of 12.5% reduction. Now, there was a point in time where the law changed, and if you have anything other than a renewal, any type of an increase, that levy no longer qualifies as being reimbursed from the state. What that means is the taxpayer pays a little bit more out of their pocket because it's not part of that rollback. So the township still gets their money. It's just they get it all from the taxpayer, where older levies that you just renew, the taxpayer gets a little bit more of a break. And when I talk 2.5%, it's pretty minimal.
Okay.
And the state reimburses the township. And they're trying to cut down on the amount because homestead gets reimbursed to us as well. And it became very costly. So the state is trying to find ways to stop that. So we as taxpayers don't really get that true 12.5%. I think in Ross, it's like 10.7% at this point.
Very good. Thank you.
Certainly.
Before the board moves into further discussion on the levy and additional, Chief Roberts, do you have anything you'd like to say this evening? And
Yeah, I know we've had these conversations and, however, we decide to make this either two separate levies or one levies, something has to be permanent so that every 5 years, our officers aren't wondering whether we're going to have a police department or a job or anything like that. With recruiting and retention being what it is right now, that definitely isn't going to help the situation if people are wondering if we're going to disband or whatever every 5 years. So hopefully something or the whole thing or whatever needs to be permanent. So we're always having some kind of funding coming in here to keep this police department afloat. I believe when I've spoken with Julie, whether we do a replacement or a renewal, I don't think there was a huge difference. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that, Julie.
The difference between a replacement and a renewal at this point, a renewal would bring in approximately 815,000, whereas a replacement, did I say that correctly? A renewal would bring in 815,000. A replacement would bring in 902,000. Our expenses are usually upwards of $1 million. So whether you renew or replace, we're still going to need an additional. And then at the bottom of the one sheet that you had from prior meeting with all the yellow on it, it kind of shows you the difference of if we do a renewal with a 1 mil increase, a replacement with a 1 mil increase, a renewal with a 1.5 and a replacement with a 1.5. There was some discussion at our last meeting. I think after the meeting, a few residents said, you need to ask for what you need, because you don't want to be in the current position that we're currently in, meaning that we're constantly trying to plug the hole. So,
I think just having one levy versus two separate levies, I don't want the taxpayers thinking that I'm coming to them every few years running another levy, and we're really not. But so I'd rather just have one single levy if that's possible.
For this time around, because that's not been any part of the discussion so far. The part of the discussion's been the renewal or a replacement, and then one of the additionals. If we run a renewal or a replacement and one of the additionals, isn't that something like the previous boards have done in the past and then merged them prior to the next one if they both pass? Does anybody remember the history on that?
well, that's what happened on this sheet that I sent you back in. You had a 2.5 mil. Your 1 mil renewal got, you had a 1 mil renewal that passed in 2009. A 2.5 additional was floated in 12 and went down. And then in 13, a 2.75 additional was run with the promise that 1 mil, because they would have overlapped for 1 year. And the board said, if you pass this, we will voluntarily rescind the 1 mil, and they did. So for the 2013 through 17 tax years, it was only 2.75 mils, when it theoretically could have been 3.75, but they rescinded it. So I tend to, just with my experience prior in the auditor's office, running two issues might be very confusing for the constituents to understand and wrap their heads around. Running one is probably, and it won't cost more. I mean, we'll have additional election expense if we run two items, but I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. But running either a renewal with an increase might be, I don't know, you can debate it back and forth, but it might be cleaner all the way across the board, and a whole lot easier to explain, I think, to understand.
Okay, so that can be done this time around.
Yes.
Put the renewal with the additional 1.5 as one spot
issue.
on the ballot box, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Discussion from any other board members?
I mean, I think from the community standpoint, I mean, there's support nonstop for the police. I think there's no question that to move to something permanent is something that the community would support, something that I would support. And the increase is, again, I agree with what people said last week or 2 weeks ago about not needing to plug a hole every time. So, you know, the additional 1.5 is, I think, gets us to where we need to be kind of looking forward. My opinion.
Yeah, I think that it's all about the messaging, right? And kind of the education that goes behind it. You've repeatedly said you want a police department, and the police department needs X to function safely, you know, whatever that number is. You know, that's having some overlapping officers, that's having adequate vehicles and equipment for that. I'd much rather we ask for what we actually need, which we've looked out and stretched some things, and COVID dollars, ARPA dollars, you know, all of that across all departments has really rubber banded some things for a while. And I like the simplicity of one. I just, for devil's advocate's sake, if we're talking about tough times and people not being able to afford things and what happens with those increases, I guess question to the board, is it better to limp along for another however many years? So say just that first part passes, but the second part doesn't? You know, like how viable is that really? You know, how much? I think that was a little bit of the thought process last time. Like that was also when we thought we had 42% coming down the pike, which was very different than. So I would just throw that out there just to make sure we're kind of balanced on it. But I mean, again, to me, there's value to having your services provided by your township as much as your residents are willing to support that. And I see Chief's point about permanent. I've worked in jobs where you didn't know every year if you were getting funding or not. And it's a rough place to be, for sure. It was kind of the nature of the job that I had, but that's tough. That's a tough place for an employee to be. That being said, I do worry a little bit about changing too much too fast and people feeling like, oh, wow, what's happening? You know, now I'm scared. And when I'm scared, I vote no.
Okay, so the consensus of the board is the renewal with a 1.5 as one voting entity in the ballot box, correct?
That's what I prefer.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you want her to write it with making it a continuing?
I think that's the future. I mean, I think looking forward, would be my opinion to do that. So we're not having these conversations all the time and there's some stability. And again, I think the community has all the confidence in these guys. So, you know, I think we can get it done as long as there's the right message and education to the community about it. I would prefer that and I would support that.
Which is what?
Permanent.
Permanent. I'm going to be on the other side of the fence on that. I think the voters, taxpayers like the opportunity. I know it's a little legwork on a board's part, police department's part, and whoever would be on the committee. I think the residents or a taxpayer likes the opportunity to give a yes or a no versus locking them down to this 1.5 additional. The renewals, I think that sits well with people, but to go ahead and throw both these at them, that go ahead and give us your vote. But we're going to lock you in that this is permanent. I don't much care for that. I know it's a legwork 5 years down the road. I understand the fact about the employee wanting to know down the road, but I think we all work in that nature where contracts only last for so long and all kinds of employment opportunities. So that's where I said I don't agree with it being a permanent. My thoughts. And where do we move forward from this? Is there going to be will there be a resolution number to send this over to?
No, tonight will just be tomorrow will be an email to Mary Ann saying this is what the board wants you to write up. And then she'll go back and forth, giving us a chance to take a peek at the language and then allowing Administrator Kyle to prepare a resolution for the first meeting in June, which would be the resolution of necessity. And then we submit that to the auditor. They give us back an actual certificate. And then on the subsequent meeting, we will do a resolution to proceed. And then we'll have everything we need to go to the Board of Elections by the due date in August. So but tonight is just, you need to tell me how you want to proceed. So she knows what to write up.
So when we look at levies overall, like we all pay mental health and social services and things like that. This may be a very unfair question, but I'm going to rely on your previous life.
Okay.
How many of those are permanent that we're already paying for? No? I mean, is there something that jumps out as permanent?
No, I believe they all on a rotating scale, even down to Metro Parks and the libraries. I think they all, because they want to be able to refresh
They're
every 5 years
recapturing,
and
right.
recapture the new value agreement, the value amounts. That is the one drawback to making a continuing levy is what you see is what you get. This is it, 1.17 mil. million in perpetuity. There is no opportunity to capture value growth down the line. So that is the downside.
So your effective rate, am I following you? Your effective rate goes down. In a permanent one, my taxes actually go down as values increase. But
Correct.
we don't net out anything different in the
Right,
end.
right. It's not
It
gonna,
gets sprinkled differently.
right. As values go up, the rate will ratchet down so that you're still generating this amount that was agreed upon.
So I hear you when you say we'd be locking people in, but we're locking them in on a sliding scale down. You know, and it's not us, but if the voters choose to, they're locking themselves in on a sliding scale down because their millage will keep dropping as values increase. So value of, money over time. But then you also, if your property values increase, you have new developments or whatever, increased demand for services, those new developments aren't paying. You can't capture them, right? So they're riding along with those new services they're asking for. So in that case, you would put on a supplemental
You could, yeah, but it would probably be for far less than what you would ask.
because you're just catching the increment.
Right.
Okay.
So over time, a continuing levy, if run frugally, a continuing levy will usually last an entity 8 to 10 years before they have to go back and say, hey, unless something is horrific, but all things remaining equal and maintaining our current spending habits, and you maintain status quo, it could probably last you 8 to 10 years, even longer if you're really good about it. The other issue is if you lock it in as a continuing now, you ensure that you have a permanent police department. Every 5 years, the subject comes up and has to be decided, and it's just what Chief said. It's kind of like inside millage. Inside millage guarantees we have a certain amount of money to run the government of Ross Township. That's what inside millage does. You don't ever have to ask for it again. This is kind of the voted version of the inside millage. But with inside millage, if values go up, we do get an increase in our revenue. If values go down, we take a hit. So.
How does this work with bonds?
Bonds are typically treated as a fixed sum. The millage is a question mark every year. They need a certain amount of money to meet their debt payments. So if values go up, it's likely that the rate goes down, but it's going to be whatever it needs to be. So bonds,
We can't use this because this is operating, right?
correct.
So it would be a totally separate. If we needed to bond an issue for the PD, like we needed to bond a facility or something like that, that's still going to be a separate issue. It's never getting paid for by this.
Correct.
So we're not cutting off a future resource by tonight's discussion.
No.
Because it's not even.
So we agree to send the 1.5 and renewal over to the county?
But you have to tell her if it's going to be, for the next meeting, you guys plus whomever is going to have to vote
Okay.
and certify it. So if you want,
But the language has to be there.
yeah, you have to tell her, do we want it to be continuous? Do we want it to be a one-time? I don't know if she can prepare both and then whoever's sitting here can be part of that discussion. I don't know what that looks like.
I could ask her if she can write it both ways, but you're just kicking it off to shortly before the meeting because the resolution will have to be written with one methodology. But yeah, I can have her write it with both. That will give you like potentially another 2 weeks to think about which way you truly want to go if you need to sleep on it.
Okay.
So if you have a permanent one, their millage is going down, but you're not going to capture
Any growth going
incoming
forward.
growth. But it could last you 8 to 10 years, which is going to basically eliminate one levy cycle in that if we're on an every 5-year levy, right? So it just gives you You're still going to have to go back to them in 8 to 10 years. It's just, you're not going to have to go back to them at year 4 or 5. And your residential millage will be going down. You're missing a sync permit, but you've earned stability for the department.
Yeah, that's right. I kind of go to that stability part of it, that I think it gives them a little bit more time to have a lot more runway for the future myself. But I understand the other side as well.
It's just hard if you start doing 5-year forecasts. The minute you pass a levy, you can forecast that 1 year.
Sure.
And then beyond that, you can't really forecast. Well, I mean, you can, you make very educated assumptions, right?
And this current, what we're looking at, the 1.5, is really not giving us a huge runway. It's still pretty tight.
Mhm.
So, I mean, but again,
From a
being,
dollar standpoint, not from a time standpoint.
absolutely,
Right.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, if you wanted some cushion to grow a little, you probably need more than the extra 1.5. Because right now, the 1.5 is just covering the dips that are happening and getting filled by grants or general fund or whatever. And maybe the other thing too to think about is if you start to do these permanent, PD permanent, you've got fire ones coming up too.
Sure.
Looking for consistency there, consolidating or permanent.
Thank you.
Anything further on the police levy topic? Chief? Okay. We'll move on to the emergency operation plan. Chief Miller, are you speaking about this or you have a few words to add to it, or we just going along with the package you presented and what?
Yes, like I said, I think a couple of meetings ago, I just wanted approval from the board. If you guys are okay with the plan, if you adopt it, then we can start going ahead and writing the annex part of the plan. I just didn't want to get it way ahead of ourselves. If you guys didn't like the basic plan, want to changes, then it'd be a really big waste of time. I'm just looking approval to get the basic plan done, and that way we can go ahead and start writing the annex part of the plan. And once those annex are approved, I'll submit those to the board for approval, and that way it's documented. My opinion, it's a well-written plan. Again, one of our employees, he's a subject matter expert, so he did an awesome job writing this up.
Anything from the board on this?
I think it is. I really like it. I think it fills in all the gaps I saw on the last one in that sense. I do. And without knowing what exactly the annexes will look like, and I mean, so we've only got like half a document, right, or a third of a document. So I want to kind of make sure we're clear on that there's more, but also it's hard to give feedback about all of it.
Those annexes, Jen, those will spell out specific
Yeah.
ones.
That's what I'm thinking. So I like the basic framework. When you start thinking about operations plans, I mean, it could be everything from, we're just going to help people and that's it, right? To like, here's our plan for business continuity. Here's our plan for talking to the residents. Here's exactly what chairs move where for emergency operations centers. I mean, there are so many levels of what those plans can have. I did like there was the proclamation was in here, so that's ready to go if you have to declare a state of emergency, because that's important. I would probably add press releases so that they're canned and ready to go, and we just need to put things in. I think there might need to be something in here. One of the things that we'll sometimes talk about is moving all your media calls to a phone number that can be transferred to anyone. So that if you have multiple people changing roles in an emergency, you just go into your Verizon account and you roll that number to whomever has responsibility. I mean, sounds like that's the kind of stuff that will be or should be in those annexes. Is that?
Yeah, but also keep in mind, if we had an emergency come through here where this emergency operation plan was to be activated, you still have Butler County Emergency Operations Center, which will provide you with PIO, press
Absolutely.
releases,
Absolutely.
your liaisons. And that's when we started this. I didn't want to get too deep in the woods because we really fall under Butler County's operation plan. So this kind of mirrors their plan as well.
And I think it's always good for us to be able to stand on our own if we needed to,
Mhm.
but defer to them.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So that's probably just a sentence or two that says, to be clear, they will handle a lot of things. However, if they don't,
And it'll spell that out. That will spell that out into the annexes.
they're worried about something huge, right? They have their focus on something in the river in Hamilton, but it's affecting us. And okay, you guys got that. We're gonna handle this part.
Yep.
And here's everything canned and ready to go. So probably also some building analysis of weak spots. And, we've talked about trash bag situation. I think things like that evolve. And just as you run exercises and scenarios and have experiences, it changes it. So I appreciate the work so far.
Thank you.
So is the board in agreement to go ahead and pass this on to Chief Miller to do his additionals and we'll okay what we have in front of us? Good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pass it on and maybe set a goal date for when you guys want to see those annexes. By the end of the year or by,
Whenever the fire department has time to have them up and ready. We won't.
Sure. We'll get it done for you.
By the end of the year?
Yeah.
Okay. I know what's,
Yeah, awesome.
got a long summer ahead of us, hopefully, and with the great weather. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Especially to you and, am I going to say Jarrett Morris?
Clayton,
I'm sorry?
Phil Clayton.
Phil, firefighter Phil Clayton. Appreciated his hard work. We'll talk about more of this in the future. Up next is the Downtown Venice District, Butler County Zoning Mixed Use Overlay District. Lori, are you running with that for your?
Well, yes, I moved this on to short-term topics because of the recent zone change request here in the close to the heart of downtown Venice. Previously, Trustee Patterson and I did speak with Butler County Planning about the best way to move forward with the downtown Venice overlay district. They referred us to a section in the newly revised Butler County Rural Zoning Resolution that provides for a mixed use overlay district. So they have requested that we utilize that. Upon that information, I did inquire with Wendy Moeller, the consultant that we used for the zoning resolution and for the land use plan update. Just if she would be interested in assisting us, and if so, what that fee would be. And I have provided you with her response. So that's pretty much where we stand. I just felt as though if something is going to be done with the downtown Venice area, that I think we've received a reminder that we need to go ahead and do so.
I'm going to let Jennifer speak on this because reading Wendy's email, she didn't sound very much in favor of this.
Yeah, I read it as though it would take a lot to get it into the county's requested overlay format. Yes.
And would we need her further assistance to make that happen, or where do we go?
I think what she's saying is that there are some things that need to happen. So like their mixed use overlay districts, it's a generic structure. And that I think they're kind of intending different communities could use different ways, right? So this would just be all right, we've checked all your zoning against the county. this is a project in Ross, we got to see if this little section applies. And that way they don't have 15 different zoning codes. They have one zoning code and there's maybe 15 versions of Article 11, depending on how this happens. I think what she's saying here isn't necessarily scary. It's just the merging of two codes, which happens. Even if we had township zoning and then we do a update in 5 years, the merging of two codes is still kind of funky. So I don't know that she's saying it doesn't work. I think she's just saying, here's the steps you're going to have to do. Here's who is legally permitted to apply under the existing structure that they're giving us. I mean, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but I think this is a question of just saying, Butler County, are you willing to adjust a few things to meet the plans that we had? And if you're not, that's okay. We need to go back and figure out how to get this design plan. And I mean, that's just throwing a little bit of money at it. And some language needs to go in there that resolves some discrepancies, but I don't think it's terrible. I don't think it's undoable. But you probably would want some help from Wendy and you probably need consultants.
Oh, yeah.
He left without even saying goodbye.
They sneak out when they can.
I know, right? There will be a text message about that.
Thank you, guys. See you.
Thanks, Chief. So I don't think it's
Have a good
terrible.
night, Chief.
I think the question is, do you want to put something in Venice? And if you do, I think this is the only vehicle that we've been offered, right? So it's either we figure this out or we just let it be what it will naturally become due to the market. The consultant and the design plan, without reading exactly what they're going to require for a design plan, you could go kind of all in and have an engineering firm do a full thing, or maybe you could get away with some good renderings. Like, this is just what we want. And that's just an art person with some planning and zoning background, right? I mean, that's what that is. That's less expensive than a full on plan.
So what does the mixed use overlay mean for the Butler County zoning that's already in place for this particular area? What is it changing, or what is it allow? Is it allowing us to do something more or
So
have a stronger?
I'm going to defer to John on this one too, from our memory, but the Venice district had like specific materials of fencing that could be used. It created a sense of place. It had some, like, we talked a lot about traffic calming to slow people down through there, thinking, okay, quaint, shopping, walkable, kind of like Jewel of Ross type feel. That's not what's there right now. So what's in there right now lets the Family Dollar happen, which is not the Jewel of Ross
Okay.
from a materials perspective, right?
Mhm.
So there were some things about like where your parking could go, because that has some traffic calming and some placemaking to it. There were some things about how you could have a little flexibility. So, you know, if you needed to have a residential area, you know, with your house, or if you needed to have something unique because your house is very close to the road. And so we have to, like, there was that kind of stuff was a little more built in to the Venice overlay than what we have now. Am I missing anything?
No, I
major?
think it's well said. I hate to say standard, but it makes it a little bit more uniform, just a little bit more, and the rules to, fencing and signage and that sort of thing.
Basically, if this was agreed upon, that from point A to point B, everybody's mailbox would all have to look the same, like in certain subdivisions that I see, the lighting would have to be, if we went down the street with lighting, all the lighting would have to be
I don't think the mailboxes would have to be the same, but like all your outside lights, the township, the county, the state, whoever, you'd be asking for like maybe a certain style of light
Okay.
for the street lights, but like the person could put whatever they need to on their house in terms of like front lights. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You'll see it, and I can't remember if this is in this one, but John brought up a good point about signs. Like a lot of times in a walkable area, you'll see a requirement for what they call blade signs, which like stick out from the building and hang down. And the idea is that way, as you're walking, you can visually see where you are versus like a lot of commercial districts will let you put them flat on the building, but you're not going to see that as you're walking around with your coffee or whatever you're doing that day. So it's just like little tweaks like that. I would say, based off of my background in some places, it is always easier to start this on the front end than to, well, I'll use Monroe as an example. We didn't do this, and we're in the process of doing something like this. And it's going to take a lot more effort than it probably would have if this had been in place 15, 20 years ago. I mean, the community wasn't ready for it or interested in it then, but we've got some challenges because we waited a while. So I would just throw that out there. It's not ever going to be easier to do this. It just tends to get harder. The only time it gets easier is if you get a property owner who's, taken out whole blocks, and that's highly unlikely. That doesn't happen often. I would recommend that we have ask Lori to talk to the county and see what their appetite is to initiate this and to be a little bit flexible. And if there is no appetite to be flexible, then we spend a little money and get this work within the framework that they're requiring. I think when we think about all our public meetings that we had over the last couple of years, we didn't get a lot of pushback. I'm not sure we got any comments on the idea of an overlay.
Right.
And it has definitely been out there.
Anybody have anything? I'm sorry.
We're going to leave it to Lori to,
See where the county stands?
yeah.
Okay. So flexible in regards to the plan that we would present, how detailed it needs to be? Is that what you're referring to, is how flexible they are?
I think, yeah, if they could give us some examples of what they require under 1104, that design plan. I've seen a wide variety of design plans. So if they could give us some examples, if they could give us like where we talk about the zoning resolution allows for residential dwellings as a conditional use, part of the principal building, like if there's a way that we could add a little language that clarifies that was not the intent. Just see how definite they are. And I'm happy to help with that.
Okay.
The one thing I would say that the board would probably not ever want to do is create a whole bunch of non-conforming I don't think the spirit of the board is to create a bunch of non-conforming uses that can't do any expansions and they can't invest and I don't think that's what people want to see. It's just, if you are going to invest, we'd like you to try to work within this character.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything further on the downtown Venice district before we move along? Anything else on short-term topics? Anything from the board?
No.
All right, we'll move on to long-term topics. The first is educational expense reimbursement policy.
Quite honestly, I thought these three topics would take a lot longer. I really haven't prepared.
Fall on that a little bit.
That's true.
Yeah, we have a current situation where we have an employee who, this is a multifaceted topic from we currently offer tuition reimbursement. Are we going to, currently it's not limited to just full-time employees. We have extended it to part-time employees. And then there is, if they leave before they give us X number of years of service, they're required to pay it back. Currently have a situation where we had a part-time employee who was paying us pretty religiously and then hasn't really been working for us. So what is the definition of part-time? Do you have to work an hour a year, 50 hours a year? So we have a gentleman who is paying it in the process of paying us back. He kind of fell off his payment schedule. I contacted him, encouraged him to fulfill his contract, which he happily is. And now he's back working for us. So does that suspend him from paying? It's just not fleshed out in our policy. So we have some holes in the policy. And again, I stressed, Lori and I have talked about this a great deal. A lot of this is just growing pains. Things were not problematic when we were really small and we had one instance and everything worked out. And as you grow, you have different things happen. So now that this person is back in our employ again on a part-time basis, are we going to continue to encourage him to pay off the tuition reimbursement, or does it suspend again? And what constitutes
How do you?
number of hours? How do you quantify? So there's just some things. My recommendation going forward would be is I'm all for the tuition reimbursement. I know specifically the firefighter paramedic training is very expensive, and we really would love to encourage them. But maybe we reimburse them 20% a year for 5 years upon their successful, meaning they have to find a way to pay for it. And then we will reimburse them. And that encourages them to stay the 5 years if they want the tuition reimbursement. The other issue we have is we have quite a few hybrid people who work multiple locations. And, I hesitate to say we offer it to a part-timer because a lot of times they're working full-time somewhere else or part-time multiple places.
Mhm.
Maybe we offer to pay a portion, but not the full. So there's just a lot of things that probably need to be looked at. And this policy probably needs to be really, really reviewed. And we need to spend some time really thinking about what's our best way going forward. Again, we could also reach out and compare it to some other departments and see how they're handling it.
I have an example of Fairfield Townships, but it's specific to the paramedic tuition.
Which
It's mainly what,
Which is the biggest challenge.
yes.
Yeah. But it's just something, and with this being kind of a cold look, probably just need to dedicate some time in a future work session, like, okay, we're really going to tear this apart after everyone's had a minute to kind of go through it and make some notes and think about potential pitfalls. I mean, I don't think we're going to think through there's always going to be a weird scenario, but
Mhm.
we have some good examples on which to build.
Do you ever have anybody who says, wow, I wish I could do X, but I can't put something together on the front end? You see a lot of companies switching from reimbursement to upfront, but then you've got challenges with that,
Yep.
right? Because your recoupment is different. But then it's a little like, why isn't anybody buying the bus pass or asking for reimbursement on the bus pass? Well, because it's a lot easier to get $1.50 a day than to find $45 at the beginning of the month for some people.
And I think that's probably why we have done the reimbursement up front, because it is a very expensive school. Historically, these are very young people who are doing it.
So we're fencing it, like they pay and then we pay and then they pay us?
I don't know. I don't know how the one arrangement was done.
Or do we just pay the school directly?
We currently have one employee who submits upon the successful completion of his semester. And then we reimburse to a certain extent to him. And that seems to be, but he is fronting those payments. And then our last firefighter, EMT that went through didn't ask us for reimbursement at all. So, which is good because it ended up leaving. So,
I think some just background information to get before our next talk about it. Number one, I think what makes us a little bit different is sometimes we need these part-time people, right? So just to exclude part-time, that doesn't fit well with chief and chief, right? I mean, they need those
right.
employees. But we also have to think it's a benefit, right? So let's talk to them about what, it's different than health insurance or whatever. This is a benefit that we're extending to somebody to get them to work here, right? So, is it necessary? Not. If it is, I mean, health insurance, yeah, I think it's really necessary to offer that as a benefit. Is it a benefit to hire somebody? Does that make somebody work here or not? I don't know. That's a good question for them. Yeah, like limitations on it. I don't see, is the sky the limit currently?
Yeah, currently, yeah.
You may have all the
I think I'm going
things
to
you
go back to
like.
school. Harvard.
And we do have them sign an actual contract with us, and that's been great. But there's some holes in that, If you come back and work for us part-time, does that meet your burden? Again, do we suspend it? Now, this employee hasn't asked us to suspend or waive the payments now that he's come back to us, but he's not been as faithful with the payments as he has been in the past. But I also know he's not working for us a great deal. He's on a PRN, so.
I really just think it should be treated like any other benefit that we have. And it should be kind of standard across the board and not ad hoc, depending on the employee. Do they get this and do they get it in a certain way?
And we also have the ability, if they agree to it, to do it payroll withholding,
I like that.
And yet I don't like the idea of always having this hanging out like a collection. Like we're not a collection agency. We don't want to get into the business of trying to collect money back from people. So however we can, limit that risk, I think is good as well. Good topic.
And maybe there's an opportunity to offer both where we reimburse you over the 5 years, at a percentage. Or you agree to pay us back through payroll deduction. But what happens when you leave our servicer? You're not working enough hours to meet. So it's.
I like the flexibility of that though.
Yeah.
Here's two avenues.
Mhm.
I would also maybe add, like you talk about a floor of employee hours, right? If I work 10 hours a month or I work every third weekend, do I get to hit you up for 10 grand?
Right.
But also
It's true.
how long do I have to ask for that? I don't see a time in here, like you have to request within 60 days of registration, or you have to submit your receipts within, because what I would hate is, you just get this pile of paperwork 7 years later, and now I'd like to be reimbursed.
Yeah.
Like, no, it would be a no, right? But I don't know that there's anything in here that says that. So,
Oh, that's true.
and maybe you guys have seen this a lot more. I'm skimming it right now, but I don't think it says.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of examples out there that's become such a standard of benefit with a lot of employers that I'm sure there's a lot of examples of ways we could mold it.
I was in a company the other day that was talking about they have a pretty good, actually, employee education benefit, but he has at least a bachelor's, if not a master's. He wanted to go back and get a certificate, a specialized certificate, and the company wouldn't let him go that avenue. They were like, no, you kind of already chosen your avenue and you're over here. And that for them is considered over here. And they're both valuable, but you don't get to jump ship, right? So I think maybe to your point of limits, I hate to say you can't do this. But at the same time, like, I love school. I'd collect degrees all day long if someone would let me, but the city does not seem to think I need those. So it's something to be aware of.
And it's kind of it's not really related, but kind of related. We currently have a program where on a new hire for a police officer with their vest, they can pay for it. They can pay it in a lump sum. They can pay us over X number of pays, but we have them sign a form telling us how they want. We front the bill for the vest. And then I think they have to pay 50% of it or something because they keep the vest upon.
Yeah, and that's a safe, that's a safe
them.
thing too.
Yeah, you can't-
Yeah, I want to do
you can't
everything we
replace
can.
No, we haven't had anybody take advantage of it in a while, but there was a while there where that's how we were moving. So they have options on, you can make one lump sum payment to us. You can take it out over 5 pays, 10 pays. We're pretty flexible on that. So we have some flexibility already in place with some other things.
So what happens when they get a replacement vest? We hit them up for that too, like,
I don't know that that
hey,
happened.
next year's. I mean, how often,
What?
A
what
replacement.
happens when they get their replacement vest? I mean, don't we replace vests every 5?
Um,
I don't know. That would be a.
that's that, we usually always get that grant. The grant
That's
takes care of the
true, too.
Oh, so if we have someone new starts and we don't cover by the grant. then we have
Correct.
to go-
That's
okay.
when maybe that's how we.
You know,
So.
No, but showing up and, I mean, I understand why we do it, but.
We good with, are we gonna work, we're gonna work on the policy.
Yeah.
I know you had one.
Dig into that.
Limit of expenses, working hours versus reimbursement.
Yeah.
So we'll visit that also in the future. Next up is HR audit. That's new for long term.
I have reached out to 3 companies. I've received 3 bids. 2 of them are in the $3,000 range. One's in $6,000 range. I will provide specifics to you. Unfortunately, I prefer the $6,000 one. It seems far more comprehensive, and I believe if we want to get our HR done correctly, that
What are they gonna do for us for that money? Since like I said,
Yeah.
I believe it's the HR audit. It's the first I've heard of this. I may not have.
We talked about it at the beginning of the year. Kind of, this was a goal for this year because our policies are so bad and we're getting rid of lexical.
We would like to.
We would like to.
Okay.
On the admin
administrative
side, just on the
Right.
admin.
Yeah, yeah.
Electrical, right?
Yep.
Give me a lot of credit that you're saying we talked about it at the first of the year.
Did, but look, you're right with us now.
as we have more
Just need a refresher.
time, our policies and
Fully lacking.
yes, our policies are woefully lacking. And my expertise is not in HR specific realm. I don't
Nor is
believe
mine.
the fiscal officers is, and we need a resource that we can go to help us when we have specific questions. So what I would like done is to have an outside entity review our policies and procedures, just simple things like required legal postings. We don't do any of that I'm aware of, but we don't know what we don't know. So it's for them to help us establish what we should be doing correctly, and then they would provide a means, through contracting a certain amount of hours a year, or just, for hourly need, a resource that we can go to when we have HR specific questions. We have become a much more important part in our employees' lives as opposed to being a part-time employer. And not only is it important to make sure legally for the township we're doing things correctly, but also for our employees and their families. So I actually put all the information into a spreadsheet and indicated what each company will do within the confines of the audit. So I will forward that information to you.
Okay.
We've used an HR audit firm when we did pay scales and job descriptions and things like that, so that you as staff couldn't be accused of being unfair. I mean, this is their world, right? They see it And I know Turtle Creek Township has an HR audit firm on call for, like, there's a unionization effort out there right now. So staff is like, oh, time out. You immediately go to the HR audit team. Like, we have a HR issue. They step in and they're just keeping them on the legal side for the elected officials who don't want to be sued, and for the staff in the township as well. So
Keep in mind, a lot of these policies were written when we had 3 or 4 full-time employees. And we've grown and we now have at least 19 full-time employees. And that number is constantly changing and growing. And then in addition to our part-time. So there are times when Lori and I look at each other and say, you know, are we doing this correctly? Should we handle this differently? What would be the best way to go forward with this? And we really are as prepared for these types of questions and issues that come up. So we just don't want to.
just want to be defensible if somebody says,
Correct.
hey, here's a problem and here's your lawsuit.
Right. And like Administrator Kyle just said, we want to be there for our employees, but we also want to protect the township too. I mean, that's what we're here to do. So let's do it correctly.
Absolutely.
All right, Ross Hamilton, Jed, next steps. Have anything on that, Lori?
Back in March, I did reach out to our attorney, Patrick Woodside, that helped with the front end of the JET implementation process, and there are still some outstanding items that need to be taken care of. Let me make you a copy of these items. To fully implement the JED, it's an additional cost of about $7,500. So the board needs to decide if it's time to move ahead with the total implementation.
Well, then, and thought we'd have a packed house, but Flubs has a packed house. I love it.
Oh, that's true.
My daughter had to present at
Good
the school
looking at
board meeting. Very big time.
I haven't had one yet this year. I'm being good.
Made up for you.
Something to keep
Well,
in mind while Lori's making copies. These things are also two potential budget items for our 24 budget discussions. If there's heartburn over doing it now, we can potentially budget for it for next year, but know that the costs may adjust.
And who does this 7,500 go to? Does it go to the city of Hamilton because they're the actual JED?
It would go to our attorney to
That goes-
provide the
The attorneys for,
legal.
Like, they have to draft all these resolutions down here
okay.
and make sure, Hamilton will have their way, Township will have their way. We gotta work that out. So, I mean, it does take a little bit of time and paperwork. I don't know what the hourly rate is and how that breaks down, but
Look-
those are things that you can't draft A through E necessarily yourself. Well, E you can draft yourself, but the other three,
Down here at the
A
bottom.
through D, you're gonna want
Levying income
someone
tax,
doing that, yeah.
City, yeah.
And we feel this is something that shouldn't wait till 2024 because the cost could go beyond the 7,500.
No, I was just filling while Lori made copies. But no, I'm just saying, anytime we're discussing something like this that we didn't budget for this year, we can always say, maybe we'll add this to the budget for next year, but knowing that the cost could increase. But to backtrack on what Trustee Patterson just said, we currently have a public records policy. Would they review our policy to make sure it meets all the requirements that they need?
I think the JED that we just did is pretty comparable to like a basic public records policy. And then it just, when you have the JED and you've got the JED board, you've got to decide like who's going to be the actual custodian of the records
Okay.
and that kind of stuff. I have one board where that is in the public records policy and I have one board where that's a separate motion. So I don't know how he would do it.
Okay, just asking.
But yeah, that one's like, it's the other ones that are a little more nuanced that I would hesitate to draft like myself.
2 audits ago, we didn't have a public records policy that was up to date. And that was something that they recommended that we do. So we did that very promptly.
Did you lose a star?
And they're on
Star rating?
they're on the, yes, we got our star
You got your
rating.
star rating?
Yes.
Wouldn't we want something like this taken care of before possibly any of the properties within the JED are sold? Wouldn't we want this already in place prior to?
I would.
And I'm just asking for the time constraint. Do we push it off to 2024 where it could add more expense because, costs go up year to year? And that some properties along any parcels that we've asked to be in that with the city of Hamilton could sell, and then we're not there.
Right.
I am a big fan of putting things into place, and if you don't need them, that's okay. But I would much rather have something in place and then not be surprised or miss an opportunity, like you said. And that applies to everything, Venice, JEDs, improvement districts. Like
Get them done.
I have never been mad at myself for putting something in place. I've been frustrated for missing an opportunity. And if you've got people that are interested in having the discussion, property owners right now, then I think you have the discussion and you get it done.
So I'd say, Lori, whenever you're ready and Frost Brown Todd is ready to get the resolution.
Okay.
Okay. Agree?
Agree.
Yeah.
Agree?
Yeah. I think so. I think it's a good move.
Township owned Morgan Lane parcel. You were working on whether that would be feasible to put that into a TIF for a JED, correct?
Yeah, I would honestly just take it off here as long-term projects. I mean, we had heard from Ellen that there was some interest. That was 6 months ago and nobody has popped up since then. I would sit on them. They're not causing problems.
Right.
They're a potential key down the road. If someone says, hey, I want to do this and this is what it would look like, and this is what I'm going to invest, and here's how that revenue flows. I definitely think it's worth a conversation, but we don't have that happening right now.
If they haven't been persistent and following up,
And they most likely want it for just extra space
Right.
or a lay down yard or something that doesn't translate
sure.
strategically for us.
Really doesn't cost us much to maintain them.
I mean, right, we're just mowing it every once in a while.
It's kind of a hole in the ground too.
It's high, yeah.
I think there's the special assessment on it.
It's not
It's not
a thing.
$13 a year or something. I think we can maintain that.
So really no follow-up on that.
Yeah, I think that one's just
Yep.
and if somebody pops up for any township property and says, hey, I'm happy to share the stuff I have from work and how we do it, but I think that was not as hot to trot as we thought.
There are some interested parties in it. One that I know of, and I'm sure Mr. Waring, who is, has developed that little area, he's interested in it. Just wait for it to come up.
I was gonna say, well, and he can give a proposal, right? Like you would want to know, okay, what are you doing out there? What's the investment gonna look like? What's potential for revenue gonna look like? And then you can always say, hey, we agree with this, but by the way, we're gonna start talking JED. And we're gonna make that JED as minimal to you as we can, but we are gonna start to anchor some of those things. And we don't have a lot of money to give away opportunities, right? But we also want to support the people that are investing in us. If you're just gonna lay pipe on it, then
So would that, and is it close to 5 acres or is it 4 point and some change?
I have no
Like,
idea.
right,
smaller, yeah, I think it was under 5.
okay. Would that be something we would approach the city of Hamilton about to see if that could go in there or no?
I think you'd want a separate one for down there than you would for anywhere else.
Okay.
Like, I think you would do separate JEDs. And you just may want, and that might just be because you might want to structure some things differently in each one. And Hamilton, as part of the JED partnership, they have to provide services, but income tax collection does not count as the service. They have to provide other services. So what they're able and willing to provide in one part of town versus another might be totally different, which would totally change your
Okay.
numbers. Yep. The easy way around that is to just have them provide economic development services. And that way they don't have to run police and fire or water and sewer,
Right.
not tax.
Sounds.
But that's the workaround that we've found.
Next up will be our building use policy, and I have a feeling that Lori may be running some paperwork off on that, so
I think so.
we will give her a moment. And that's the last thing on our agenda tonight for long-term and be an executive session.
Y'all want to talk back there?
We all do.
So this policy, I don't know how it got approved because we don't do any of it.
Also through Lexipool,
Yeah,
and we don't do any of this.
we don't do any of this. So,
So basically we could draft our own from scratch.
yeah, so as you can see, my hand scratch, and at the top, we do need to include the use of the tactical area and the back and include along with that there is a waiver to be signed for that area. So I'll review this further and make some recommendations, but I just wanted you to see what we've currently got and if there's any of it you would like to keep and put in place.
Okay. And number two, either read this over before our next work session.
Whether they're allowed to put up a permanent sign. Not specified.
No.
It's
Within the interior of the building?
within the interior.
Correct. So we're going to review this and talk about it in a month or so. Is there anything else on building use policies before we go into executive session?
I would just add, we had a situation with this at my office last week. And it was an eye-opening experience from a training perspective for employees, because we have a lot of new employees that have not been public sector employees before. But there was a gentleman who wanted to protest at the city building. He called and gave us notice and then didn't show up, but then came like 4 days later. So we still consider that to have been very considerate of him. But we had a lot of confusion about like where you can protest and what is public and what is not. And, you know, he is absolutely allowed to come in and film my office, for example. You can't, I'm not shutting the door. This is a public space, but it did make us question and think through a lot of that. So as you're thinking through this, I can see we've got like spontaneous expressive activities. You just may want to have some legal review on free speech and where that can happen and to what extent, and clarify things like you can't block roadways, you can't have safety issues, but you can absolutely stand where you want to stand to do what you want to do. And again, just was like a moment that we realized
What if-
we do a lot of other trainings, but we
Wait,
hadn't done that.
You've mentioned somebody could come in and film your office. What about like an area where they might have weapons secured or evidence, or we have
Secure,
locations- yeah.
So I was not there when this happened. But my understanding is we let them in. They could walk through the city manager's office. They could take a look at all the doors that were shut. They didn't actually ask to open. They just commented like, oh, that's not labeled. Well, we don't label every door in the building. We don't label any of the offices actually either. So they did come in, did look through a couple offices, kind of that kind of thing, and then filmed their way on out. So I would assume there's some protections for sensitive areas, but I don't know we didn't run into that one
Where our
yet.
payroll records are and
Mhm.
things of that nature.
Yeah. And the difference between like going through them, right?
Correct.
Versus
Just
access and, right. But yeah, like I know our HR records are locked down. I mean, we have very few people that can get to them as staff. I guess if you wanted to protest in that room, I don't know. Just something for you guys to think about, right? The groups that are going through a process to rent the space, but also the groups that just show up.
Great idea.
That's all I have on that.
All right, I believe that concludes all the topics.
One, the roof, did we get anything on that yet? See that?
Requested estimates from
Okay.
entities.
Maybe just put that on for our next one. With the rain that we had early in the week, I know you guys had to bring in your gear.
I should have bids in by then. I have an appointment here on Monday at 4. And then I'm had to cancel one for tomorrow. So I'll be setting it up hopefully for next week before we come up on the holidays and have them present their material
Right.
and their bids.
Just like for the benefit of everybody, the rains came through this week. There were bulging ceiling tiles and dripping trash cans on top of desks holding the water and trash bags covering materials that are sensitive and just not a place I would want to work. Not safe for our township materials, so. Roofs are not fun, whether it's your house or your building, but I get them done. This one has outlasted its useful life.
Trustee Blower, do you want that for the next regular meeting under old business or just wait till the work session?
Let's wait for the work session. I don't know, once they make their visit, how long it will take them. The receptionist called and said she got my request online and that sales would be getting with me. That was 2 days ago with one. And then of course the one I have to change.
Okay.
So we give them a little bit of time.
You might be really busy right now.
That time of year. I don't think executive session will take that long. Are you sticking around till we close the end of the meeting altogether, or were you gonna exit while we were in executive session?
She doesn't need to be in executive.
Right. That's why I asked if she was gonna stay around till we, nope.
No, I think I'm
You ready to go?
done. Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyhow, before we adjourn and I make the motion to go into executive session, I'm sure most of you are aware and at home that trustee Jennifer Patterson this is her last meeting, but she will be a trustee until the end of the month. Workload and family obligations are pressing, and that comes first. We appreciate the knowledge and professionalism she brought to this board. She her full-time job with the city of Monroe she has a vast amount of knowledge towards properties and developments, tips and jeds. And she has graciously said if we need her, she's only a phone call away and she'd be willing to sit in on and help us out with those type of meetings. And we greatly appreciate that because those are not what I do. That is not what I do for a living. And that sometimes I'm flying blind, but it has been awesome to have her here with us and hate to see her go, truly. I think we have a card and something else. If anybody like to get it?
I'm going to take cards home because
We go way back.
we do go way back. Oh, thank you. Thanks, you guys. Appreciate it. It has been delightful. There's tough moments and I owe my family a lot of thank yous. You may have seen them waving as they were getting things out of the car and kind of living their best life right now, but I learned a ton. So, you speak of my background and I'm always happy to share, but I learned a lot too on this side and appreciate everybody who supported me. You guys all up here and the department heads who have all left us.
Yes.
And, even just residents that I would never have met otherwise. So I really appreciate that. And I'm always happy to brainstorm, happy to talk, happy to share the things that I have done that I thought, oh, I would never do that again. Let me talk about that one. But yeah, any way I can support the township, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you will hold on for one second. Because guess what?
Gift bags.
Gift bags. Yeah.
I think you have this backwards.
No, I don't, because, the mom in me is like, oh, I will give people gifts. And then, John, this may not make a ton of sense to you, but I feel like everybody else will kind of understand what's in here. So you guys can take a peek.
Oh, I understand.
You understand?
Absolutely.
So my very first meeting, maybe the first week, Lori was like, hey, we hate to tell you this, but all the townships get together for dinner and we are hosting. And so you'll be there and meet like the whole county, right? And I was like, oh, yeah, that'd be great. But when we were there, Keith brought the most amazing bundt cakes for dessert. And we were all like, oh, this is great. Like I'm sweet but icing. And so everybody has a little mini bundt cake kind of in honor of it being around. And
Beginning.
whether you have some of hers is really.
It's from nothing but bunt, and they're phenomenal.
They are amazing.
So,
They are phenomenal.
the best.
So I thought I'd leave you with a sweet treat and thank you very much.
Thank you. She knows us well.
My birthday is Saturday.
Oh, well, happy birthday
Thank
also.
Thank you, Jen.
Yes, absolutely.
Passion and compassion for township and its employees and community is inspiring. So thank you so much.
I'm very lucky to get to do what I love. So I will get out of your hair. You guys can executive session away.
All right.
Leave with the peanuts.
For the adoption of motion 23-073 to retire to executive session to discuss the appointment of a public official in accordance with Ohio Revised Code Section 12.22G1. The time is, I can't see that,
22.
7:22. I need a second.
Second.
Discussion, roll call.
Trustee Fisher,
Yes.
trustee Patterson,
Yes.
trustee Blower.
Yes.
You guys can eat those during their.
All right.
Kicking us all out so you can be out here soon.
No, we'll head back to
Okay, there we go.
Move for the adoption of motion 23-074 to return from executive session to the regular meeting. The time is,
7:34.
I need a second.
Second?
Discussion? Roll call.
Trustee Fisher,
Yes.
trustee Patterson.
Yes. Yes.
Trustee Blower.
Yes.
Next.
31st of May, my dear.
Oh, I'm sorry, let me read off.
Oh,
I've lost my page. No, I haven't.
take us off air.
Yes, I have. You got me.
We didn't adjourn.
Closing.
I'm just kidding.
I'm looking, oh, here we go. Is there any further business come before the board? Move for the adoption of motion 23-075 to adjourn the meeting. I need a second.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Trustee Fisher.
Yes.
And in her final vote, trustee Patterson.
Yes.
Trustee Blower.
Yes. Our next regular meeting will be June 1st at 6 PM, Ross Government Center. Thank you.